Hello, everyone, and welcome to IFMA's webinar series. I'm Dean Stanberry, past chair of IFMA's Global Board of Directors, and I appreciate you joining us today. Before we get into the program, I'd like to make this session interactive. In the chat, please share where you're tuning in from, whether that's across town or across the globe. And if you can, tell us what prompted you to join today's session. Was it interest in the topic, current challenge in your organization, or the search for strategies to improve your operations? Our focus today is the Digital Executive Playbook, using data to drive efficiency, agility, and growth. Next slide, please. I'm joined today by two panelists from Aurora Engineers, Howard Schatz, Vice President of Global Smart Infrastructure, and Howard brings deep experience in smart building integration, enterprise asset management, and technology-enabled operations. And Steve Bish, Vice President of Enterprise Solutions. Steve has led portfolio initiatives that align technologies, process, and people to measurable results. Next slide, please. Before we invite their perspectives, let's set the stage with an overview of what we're exploring today. We've got four key areas: clarifying the ownership, the overview of the session. Why do we need the digital playbook? What is it? What's its value? Who benefits? And how do you start? And what are the resources? And the next slide, please. And with that, looking at some of the discussion areas, we're going to clarify ownership and establishing accountability across facilities, IT, and finance, unblocking the IT or the workflow bottlenecks to improve coordination and decision speed, focusing on data elements that drive cost, risk, and performance, and connecting all of this through a repeatable playbook that turns insights into action. The reason we need this playbook is clear. Many organizations face fragmented decision-making between facilities, IT, and finance, slow execution due to unclear authority, and excessive handoffs, and a flood of data that is either incomplete or not tied to outcomes. The playbook addresses these issues by creating concise, implementation-ready guide to turn the building and operations data into measurable business results. With that foundation in place, let's begin our discussion. Howard and Steve, thank you both for being here. And Howard, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dean, and welcome IFMA to our presentation. A little bit of an overview of the playbook. So what is it? Really, the idea behind the playbook is to break down certain pieces of information into both a cycle of data to action, which you're seeing on the screen, in a circle that allows for both outgoing and ingoing information, so it provides a cycle, a feedback loop. Part of our research has shown, which shouldn't be unknown to the audience, four major domains that the playbook is looking to address: space management, energy management, safety, and enterprise asset management. Part of what we've done within the playbook is also link those to key systems. And you see a list of systems such as integrated workplace management, CMMS and EAM, building automation, ERP, safety vendor. So there are primary systems we're all using, and part of the idea of the playbook is to bridge some of those connections and then also provide some of the data elements and source systems that allow you to obtain some value from that data that you've been collecting. So the value here is that within these particular pieces we're mentioning, financial clarity, is what we're looking to do is bridge those CapEx and OpEx drivers, develop those metrics, specifically looking at things that are critical but often underutilized, such as FCI, energy use, which are important at the higher levels, but may not be brought up through the data systems. Lagging issues into actionable, looking at safety, deferred maintenance. We all know the incredible cost impact that deferred maintenance can have on your portfolio. Part of that is really moving those to the front to maintain an equilibrium. Performance acceleration. That feedback loop we were showing above is designed to provide more reporting and processes so you can start to provide demonstrable ROI based on data. And then certainly the stakeholder alignment. How do we bridge the various groups that have an impact with technology, with the information, and come up with a common dictionary in terms of process, information, and system. Who will benefit? So certainly those within the IFMA world can see the benefit of having the data evidence to understand the strategic alliance going forward. What is the asset life for total cost of ownership concepts and value? The CFOs, they really need to understand where the forecasting is built and how does it change based upon events, conditions, whether foreseen or unforeseen. COO and risk, certainly the understanding of how the operations are occurring, how well they're performing, what is our capability for advancement and maturity. And then ESG, in terms of these water targets, do we understand if we have a variety of leakages, or do we have carbon targets we're looking to achieve? How do we do those? And then scorecards, how do we put together those scorecards? And then one of the things we also wanted to talk about in this presentation was, how do you get going? And what we put together here is just a basic timeline of focusing on those key domains, say space management or enterprise asset management, that have a tangible ROI. Develop a key metric and key performance indicator for those categories. Follow through on that. And then map the data path. The key thing that we're looking to do is, in unison with that KPI, are the systems that would provide it, as well as certainly the owners and managers of those systems, because they would be very key to maintaining it. Then the one-page charter. Do something that's concise, easily understandable, can be presented to executive leadership, and includes a holistic view of what you're trying to do and where you're trying to go. And then your data extraction. Go into the technology, work with your various teams and vendors to provide information coming out of those systems, provide a way to look at those systems, and certainly in that bi-directional feedback loop, set alerts. We're not necessarily talking about AI at this point, but we are talking about a way to alert if conditions are not met based upon a prescribed set of information. And then a pilot project. Very, very important to try to present a win within a few months based upon your theory, prove your theory, and then expand upon that success and move forward into a short time frame. And then this is essentially a non-ranked look when we went across various information from IFMA, BOMA, other sources, and we sort of racked and stacked and look at the variety of domains. They sort of align themselves: space management, energy performance and safety, and then you'll see a lot of these 8 come into enterprise asset management. So we know a lot of the cost and energy for maintaining your portfolio goes into those assets. And then what we did going across the right of this is, what is that title? What is it, or essentially the section or use case that we're looking to identify? What is the focus? And then what is our outcome? So a simple way to organize this information and sort of put that together. And then we'll walk through kind of the deeper dive. So what does a section look like in the playbook? How do you organize that? And in the occupancy section, what you see here, going down the left side, are the detailed sections that you would be looking for to bring along at the same level. That insight to impact cycle. It's the data, the metrics, the key performance indicators, and that decision action tandem that allows you to understand the information. Identify the data elements, in this case, occupancy sensors, swipe logs. How do you track what's happening in the facility? Identify those systems as well. The integrated workplace management system, the IoT section, sensors, for example. And then who's working on it? The space planning team, the experience team, security managers, for example. And then what you'll see are the set of references for that. So in this example, when we're looking at occupancy, this can also be extended in, you take the idea that it might not be within an office environment. It may be for transportation if you're looking at passenger load. It could be the same for aviation through an airport terminal, for healthcare using adjusted patient days and patient care, even in a variety of other modes. So this particular idea is adaptable to other non-office spaces. And then in the upper right, you see essentially what's the key takeaway of a section. In this section, it is really to deploy sensoring that allows you to passively and actively understand what's happening within the facilities so that you can measure that efficiency of the spaces. How much vacancy do you have and utilization?
Howard, let me interject on this one just quickly. So the insight to impact cycle is a key theme here. So how do you advise your clients on setting thresholds and trigger actions for KPIs so that they reliably drive a change in operations, not just plain old reporting?
Right. Well, it's a great question. First of all, we want to understand what information do they have? What systems are available? So from that, we'll then look to see what can we measure. So if they are tracking their space inventory relatively well, if they are tracking their asset inventory relatively well, we can then build metrics for that. If not, we'll need to do some data discovery and consolidation, maybe even go out and do some field work. In terms of the KPIs, going back to the earlier slides, it's really a matter of understanding where that value proposition is. What is the criticality and risk portfolio for that environment to develop the KPI? In this example, maybe they're looking for and they need a very high space utilization rate, and they also need that space utilization rate to be accurate. No coffee badging type of scenario that we're seeing, for example. They need to understand what's happening more deeply. What's happening in conference rooms, for example, in office spaces. What's happening in terminal flow for an airport. So those KPIs are then built based upon that specific metric that they're trying to achieve. Could it be a cost savings? Will it be potentially an energy savings at peak time? What are those events? So we work through that with them to develop the metrics and then the specific use case. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. So again, talk about energy performance a little bit. So why is energy consumption and intensity important? It's one of the highest controllable costs in a facility. There's the ability to put in smart metering, monitoring, whether it's water monitoring or energy monitoring from electricity or gas. You have the ability to use your building automation systems to a higher degree and provide that information. So following along from Dean's question a little bit, what do you need to do this? You would need to have identification of your assets between various systems, between your energy management system and your asset system potentially, and have metering and smart metering. The benefit there is that you then start to gain much more insight in a timely manner of what's happening within your portfolio. And then the takeaway, as you see on the upper right, is deploying the smart meters, creating dashboards, working with your energy vendors to create a feedback loop that allows you to inform what you're doing. Could you bring certain parts of the facility offline at certain times because they're underutilized? Do you need to adjust the way you're paying for energy based upon the usage of your facilities, for example? Part of this has been adapted pretty well by the vendors. It would probably be something that could be expanded into a larger part of the portfolio. And then I'll come to the last one before we move into the asset side, which is safety. So safety has come up a lot throughout IFMA, and the ability and has a very tangible impact on the overall facility management. If you're in a situation where you have an excessive amount of safety incidents or compliance, it's really important to track that, and that is one of the key metrics here. So it can have fines. You could have certainly the near misses depending on the amount of construction that's happening. And then you see in that impact cycle is really understanding how many incidents are you having? What is your metric relative to others in the industry, which is critical, your recordable time, and then you see the systems here. So the playbook idea is use those reporting tools to track those incidents and near misses, inform the organization, and then again, provide ROI that says, our ability to improve our safety record and minimize impact has this amount of financial gain through the organization. So with this, what I'd like to do is hand some of this over to Steve Bish to talk about the asset side.
Great, thanks, Howard. So moving into the asset management section, And Howard talked a little bit about at the beginning. One point, just as we kick this section off, is CMMS was often the term in the past, and we're migrating to EAM. For me, it's an important differentiation because we really are moving to asset management from traditional just work order systems, and that's really what we're being asked to do is be better stewards of our assets and not just taking care of those assets. And that's why I think it's an important differentiator. So moving into this first piece, why does it matter in terms of the asset lifecycle cost data? um, when you look at your assets, poorly timed replacement or maintenance on those assets can have significant impact on the organization. HVAC and elevators are a couple examples that we list out here. And as most can imagine, those have very broad and wide-ranging impacts on an organizations. So if you don't have a good understanding of the maintenance of those or the replacement times cycles for those, it can have a significant impact on the organization. One metric that our clients are starting to move into is customer experience. Organizations are actually now measuring what is that experience that their customers are seeing as a part of their operations that they're providing. HVC and elevators can have a significant impact on that. And so it's more than just purely a cost perspective and replacement of those assets, but how is this impacting the end customer? How is it impacting their experience and their overall satisfaction with the service that you may be offering? So it talks about some of the things there, what's important, installation dates, maintenance logs, what are those records that you're able to keep track of, being able to have good metrics on these assets. Again, that's why it's important not just to have work order metrics, but actually performance metrics on your assets, right? Uptime, what is the actual cost, things of that nature. That will then feed into your capital programs that give you better decision-making process on when replacement cycles need to be put in place, or when are those right times for those investments in the appropriate assets at your organization. And so you can see some of the data elements that we listed there that are important to track. Um, One other aspect of the data elements that's changed and will continue to change, Howard touched briefly on AI, but is having a big impact. Historically, we wanted to track lots of information from an attribute standpoint of assets. That's really not as important as it was in the past. Just key information as we've got listed there is really what's most important with the AI assistant tools that are available to us. So much of that information can be easily retrieved, and we don't have to put as much energy into tracking that internally with our own systems. And then the systems that you see listed there, I talked a little bit about the beginning, CMMS or EAM platforms. As we get more integration of our assets, asset registry is another topic that a lot of organizations are talking about. You have a half a dozen systems. Do you have a common asset registry that you can link and align the information across these different platforms to those assets is becoming more and more important. And of course, our ERP systems and getting integrated into those with the key information that's coming from there. So the playbook is, again, what is that EAM system, CMMS system that you're using to manage your assets, and how can you leverage those to forecast your replacement budgets in that 3 to 4 5-year cycle.
Steve,
Right?
let
How?
me interject here
Sure.
because we talk about data being the new currency, but in data analytics is how you unlock it. It's what you do with the data, not just the sake of collecting it. So, how do you advise clients on how to quantify and communicate deferred maintenance risks in dollars and impact? The safety, the continuity, and compliance, so that
Yeah.
you can actually leverage the facts around that.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, Dean. And what I tell our clients is most organizations have lots of data, they don't have information. And that's the challenge. We've been so focused on collecting the data, being able to leverage and use that data as far as information is what is missing, and that's part of what you're referring to. So one aspect that we are working with our clients to get in place is more of a data analytics, position or part of your organization that can look at these different systems that Howard and I have been talking about, and being able to pull the information out into a simple form that can show the numbers that you're referring to. So what is the impact of deferred maintenance? What is the impact of not putting in capital replacement costs? That data may be in your system because we haven't been able to pull it out with some sort of analytical reporting tool. They're not able to show senior management the impacts of their decisions. So we are working with organizations to put in an analytics reporting, again, part of their organization that can pull the information out, such as, again, deferred costs, impact, increase in maintenance costs, downtime, that customer experience. That's one that gets a lot of attention now in the C-suites. So if you're able to pull those types of metrics out and then put them in a condensed, simple form with that C-suite, we're seeing better impact and results there.
Thanks, Steve. And just a shameless plug for one of IFMA's most recent reports. They just released The Rise of the FM Analyst. And what you were talking about is that you have to have people that understand the systems and the impacts and how to actually analyze the data. And that's something that's been missing from most commercial real estate organizations. So probably something to go take a look at. If you don't have someone who does this in the organization, you're probably missing a spot.
Well, you triggered another thought, Dean, and it's a great point. Another concept that we talk with our clients. So much of these conversations turn into a conversation about what IWMS system have you selected? What EAM system have you selected? There's lots of them out there, and there are lots of good ones out there. But what we tell everybody, we should not be looking at these as IT implementation projects. And too often that's what they are. Because it comes down to purchasing a particular software application, it becomes very IT focused. What we work with our clients is this should really be a business process re-implementation or a business process re-engineering concept. Look at it. What is the underlying business processes that these different tools and platforms that we're talking about are looking to solve? That needs to be a greater part of the conversation. And when we see organizations have a better understanding of that, have better expectations of what they're wanting out of those IT systems, they have much better results. When they look at it, or they don't have those, and they look at it as just an IT project, unfortunately, the success, the satisfaction rate of those projects are less, and then the IT system gets blamed as not being adequate, and they want to select a different system when in reality it's not the IT system. Again, it's not understanding what your business processes are.
Thanks, Steve. We could actually do a whole webinar on that topic
Right.
alone. So
Yeah. All right, next slide out. That's great. Thanks for the input. Next
And
slide
Steve,
out.
if you'd like me to take this one for a minute,
Sure.
take that a little bit. So working into this one in terms of work order response and resolution time, the emphasis here, as you're seeing, is that slow responses have the increased downtime. There's satisfaction issues with a delay in responding to a variety of requests coming in, and then you have issues with your SLA. So the insight to impact cycle we're talking about is really putting together a process of having a quick cycle from request through distribution of the work, the enablement of the work, and then back. So what you're seeing here are the timestamps, priorities coming in from the CMMS or the EAM system. That's a key one, is to prioritize based upon the type of work, where it's coming from. That comes back to the understanding of criticality and priority and how that is reflected metrically inside of your system. And then you're seeing some of those metrics developing: the average response time, the resolution time. You might have mean time between failures depending on what you're doing, and you're developing these KPIs. We were talking a little bit offline about the other part that is critical is to really create an environment where everything is put into the system and is the only your EAM or CMMS system is the only place where work is requested, and it's the only place where vendors work, and the only place where the metrics come from. So it is a single source, whether it be a combination of systems, but it is a single source to track this information. And the key reason there is that because of the way contracts can work, because of the way various metrics for performance work for various vendors, there are ways that you might not have accurate information, but that's the critical pieces to obtain that buy-in. And then that decision action is really to identify the bottlenecks, allocate resources properly. One of the things I worked on earlier was related to a healthcare system that was trying to improve their efficiency for work orders. And part of what they did was very clearly establish the estimated time for various activities, whether it be painting, carpentry, electrical, construction, et cetera, HVAC. And by having that as part of this, set up their preventive maintenance, but it was a key piece for them to ensure that the amount of time that craftspeople were taking on the task was appropriate for the type of task. So there was equilibrium, and they knew that things were being done efficiently. And you see in the times, the data elements is having the timestamp, the priority of the dispatch. Where we're getting into now, which are becoming more and more enabled, are the mobile systems, whether it's a ruggedized tablet or it's a phone, even a person's personal phone, the ability for someone to go out into the field and use something that is tracked. It could be online or offline capable, and you're really looking for that management. Now, the other piece that we're noting here is that the management of these type of activities should really be done at the level where people are working directly with people in the field, the maintenance supervisors, the coordinators, that they are very in tune with how well things are performing, are the pick lists and drop lists for craftspeople accurate, etc. And then you're seeing in the playbook, it's really developing whether they are vendor-based or they are something that you're building in combination with other teams. You also have the ability to enhance these. Part of what's coming online now are augmented reality and virtual reality capabilities, where there are goggles interfaces that can accelerate the ability of a craftsperson to work in the field. Some of these new AR, VR interfaces allow for you to phone a friend, essentially. So if a relatively lower skilled worker is out and they find themselves in a situation above their particular skill set, they can call to a supervisor who could be anywhere in the world. That supervisor can literally see what they see through the goggles, can interact with them and support that in a real-time situation, so that the technology is supporting the ability of them, instead of putting it on hold and going back, they can work together. And one supervisor might be anywhere in the world, even in another country, and allowing that activity to work forward very quickly. So just to give you a little bit of that feedback, and certainly
yeah, let me try, if I could add in here one thing, because you bring up a good point. And we're talking about here about work order response and resolution time, but I talked previously about data. I was talking about metrics. Dean, you asked about that, and you mentioned as well, Howard. And you're talking about technology. We as facility managers, we want to get our hands on the data. That's what we're talking about, so we can get the information that we need to make better decisions. This is where technology is becoming a bigger and playing a better role. If you talk to any organization, when you talk about work orders, getting work in, documenting, what is the most common response? It takes too long. It's hard. It's difficult. You ask technicians, they're going to say the same thing. The technology you mentioned, we all have smart devices. We must be leveraging the technology to, one, make it simpler. If it's not simple, our eyes and ears in the field are not going to get the information we want, and we want accurate information. If you do not have accurate data, accurate information, you're going to build a model that's based off of poor information. And this is where technology can really be leveraged to improve both of those pieces.
Exactly. And
the
one, oh, sorry, go ahead, Dean.
I was going to say, if I can just add a point on that too, I agree with everything, and these are all valuable metrics for a variety of reasons, and we do need to reduce the friction in collecting that data. But one of the things about work order response and resolution times is that the point is not to just see that the box work complete was checked. What you want is actual proof of service.
Yeah.
We have more and more organizations that manage a wide-ranging portfolio, and you can't be there to look at all of this stuff. So how do you know that when you hired this third party to go out and do some work, was that work actually completed and completed to your satisfaction? You need that evidence. So that's just another piece that mobile technology is enabling, providing that, you can actually track to say the technician geospatially was at the location because you can track, were they there? Can you get a geospatial locator? Can you get pictures or other evidence that shows that work was done?
Right.
Howard?
I think the other part, and even this photograph on this slide illustrates that, is that the most efficient conceptual way that everyone would like an interaction to occur is a work request happens, is dispatched to a technician. The technician knows exactly where to go. As you said, Dean, they know which location, they know which panel to go to. When they go to that panel, they could hit a QR code, or they can verify that it's the right piece of equipment. They can then do the work. If they need to pull information up on their tablet relative to that, an operations guide or a lockout tagout procedure, that is all available to them. They may not know all of this going in, but they don't have to stop to get there. And where this becomes crucial is if the BMS system calls it something else, or the asset management system calls it something else, or the room numbers are actually not the same, and that person is going to the wrong place, happens all the time, right? So that efficiency becomes lost. It is something that we can work on as an industry to improve the single source of information, the single room code. GIS now is becoming more prevalent, helping support that, as you mentioned, Dean, indoors capabilities, allowing you to pinpoint the exact location of something. So technology can support these processes, but they are very data sensitive, that the supporting underlying systems do talk together or do share common data elements. Without that common data dictionary that we were talking about, it becomes harder to support a portfolio level view of what's happening. So Steve, if you want me to go on this one, or?
No, we both can. I think we probably already talked a little bit about deferred maintenance, right? I mean, to me, deferred maintenance is somewhat self-explanatory. It's easy from a macro level perspective, that everybody says just push those things out. But we as facility managers, know that the potential impact, can is coming. It may not be immediate, and that's why this is easy, right? Our risk is going to go up as that deferred maintenance takes place. And then those capital costs may happen more quickly because we haven't properly maintained our assets. So it's easy from some perspective, but it really just goes back to the same thing. The better topics that we've been discussing, our ability as facility managers to better monitor, get the information, collect the data, and get the information and the analytics to communicate to senior management the impact of this is important. So again, we need to be looking at backlogged work orders, as you see there, estimates. What is that total deferred maintenance cost? What are the in terms of the KPIs that you can measure those, and putting together remediation plans, impact to capital funding that is going to result in this. And once again, the systems that we keep talking about, IWMS, CMMS, EAM systems are going to be critical for this. Uh, Slightly one topic on the technology conversation. Again, this is where technology has gotten better. In the past, there was a lot of third-party systems that organizations would buy for doing facility condition assessment software, as we see there. More and more of the IWMS, EAM systems are incorporating that. So again, the more you incorporate those into singular systems, that data dictionary that Howard's referring to becomes easier. So again, this is the importance of the technology, how it can play into helping this process and get better capital forecasting information for the C-suite as a result of deferring maintenance and those increase in maintenance backlog. So that facility condition assessment is important. biggest takeaway for me is we get those facility condition assessments and then they sit on the shelf, right? So once again, that's data that's been collected. You can hear the theme here, but how are we taking that data and putting it in more useful format to give information for our facility managers? Howard, you
Right.
add anything to that?
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And it's exactly where I was going with that, which is the emphasis on FCI, I think still tends to be financially driven. It's a metric of the value based upon the the sum of the maintenance costs. So it's financially driven. Um, but it requires a lot of operational and should require a lot of operational information and assets. It tends to be done top down, broad brush, without the definitive understanding of what goes in. And it is industry specific as well. So deferred maintenance, just using broad calculations of square footages and cost for a complex infrastructure, is probably undervaluing certain activities and certain costs where they should be done. And to your point, I would make the suggestion to move these activities inside the EAM systems so that they are not done as a one-off paper exercise that is done every 5 years, but it loses its value pretty quickly
Correct.
in the interim between those cycles. Bringing that cycle down, and certainly as that information is available to AI, I think groups are probably already doing it. We've all probably tried this ourselves to say, what does AI say about our maintenance plan? And it's amazingly intuitive on those capabilities and learning very quickly. So to do that for your organization does require that foundational information available, and then you can start to really accelerate the analysis using various types of AI tools. So I would make a play for that. I think it's something that is undervalued in this calculus of overall total cost of ownership.
Just to add a slightly different perspective on that, on how to approach this, facility condition assessments, like you said, once every 5 years, it was treated as a transaction.
Right.
And so you go out, you collect the data, and it doesn't go anywhere. It's not tied into these things.
Correct.
The systems that we have today, the technology is there that if you keep that information up to date, it is continuously available to you, month by month, even day by day if you needed it. But if it's up to date, you can continuously understand what your FCI number is, where your backlog is, what your risks are. But that's where you've gone from a transaction to an operational activity. That's a mindset change. And everybody historically still thinks of it as a transaction and not as an operational activity.
Good point. Yep. All right, next slide. Sorry. Okay, next, kind of continuing on a similar theme is talking about preventative versus maintenance, reactive maintenance ratio, and what is that proper ratio, and what are we trying to achieve? So in terms of why it matters, obviously reactive ratios, have an impact on downtime, right? High repair costs. When it's reactive, it's going to be inconvenient, and gathering the resources to do that are typically more costly, and safety is a key aspect of this. As things break, that potential of having an impact to staff from a safety perspective uh, also increases. And you can see the traditional curve there on the right, that has been in industry for many years, that talks about that. So really, it is important for organizations to, one, define their assets. Another concept that we talk about with organizations is you really need to look at assets. Some assets are meant to be run to failure, right? And so that factors into this conversation, right? You want to be performing PMs on the correct assets. Don't be performing PMs on assets that don't make sense. Focus on those high impact, high costs that are going to impact the business, and ensuring you have strong PM programs in for those that it makes sense from a rent to fail perspective. Make sure those are not part of your preventive maintenance program, because that's the challenge, right? It's always a lack of resources is what comes down to often driving this conversation on this slide here. So we really encourage people to make sure that as they increase their preventive maintenance program, they really want to make sure that they're PMing the correct assets. So in terms of, it's going to get back to, again, a lot of information in your EM system is key in terms of delivering the information that you're needed to perform the analysis on this. The other piece, as organizations evolve and become more advanced, we'd like them to break apart their PM maintenance program. And what I mean by that is there's different types of preventative maintenance, right? You have condition-based maintenance, you have predictive maintenance, et cetera. If you can evolve your program from strictly a PM, too often a PM is just a time-based concept for many of their maintenance activities, really move to more towards those other types of maintenance activities is going to have a positive impact on that ratio. And we will see it will also have a positive impact on reducing those reactive maintenance activities. So some basic pieces of information you're looking at: number and labor hours of preventative and reactive work orders, and looking at the cost of those. And once again, it's going to be those same platforms that you're going to be getting that information. But this is really, from my perspective, of evolutionary part of your program is starting from a very simple PM type program, but moving to more advanced type maintenance plan to maintenance activities. And then will all cumulatively have that positive impact on the reactive maintenance and cost, downtime, and customer impact to your end customer.
Yeah, I think we were running a little long, but I think the one part to add to that is it is really critical to have a ratio of one reactive work order to many preventive maintenance work orders. For different clients, I've had ratios of 6 or 7 to 1. So the amount of PMs outnumbered the amount of reactive work by multiples. And that was an indication of maturity because you were able to do more work in a prescribed way. So there was less break. And it's industry specific. Let's be true that if you're in manufacturing, pharmaceutical, certain things that are critical, or in transportation, rail, certain pieces of your portfolio are going to be very, very highly maintained. Others could drop off rapidly. And that's part of what we're discussing, is bringing the other parts of that portfolio at a higher maturity. So I'll jump to the next slide for this one. And I'll take a little bit of this one in terms of vendor performance and the cost metrics. So really what you're looking for here, which is also an area that tends to be, maybe it's moved over into the procurement side, it's not well tracked within the FM side specifically, is going to be how well various vendors are performing and having a way to scorecard them uniformly and quickly based upon prescribed metrics, so that you really understand how well the services you're procuring are coming back and how efficiently they're working. So you see in the systems, vendor management, procurement systems, this becomes the critical connection here is really the facility management being intertwined with procurement and finance, so that there is that commonality of understanding we are spending this much money on certain support services. Are we receiving the benefit of that? And are those vendors using our systems, or if they're not required to use our system, are they providing information in a way that's ingestible into our system easily that we can then perform analysis on? I think that's another critical concern. So I'll stop if there's some discussion there.
Just real quick. I mean, Howard, you hit right on it. I mean, outsourcing is such a large part of every organization. So this vendor management, vendor performance is really critical. And yes, too often it's become a procurement exercise. I got the lowest cost vendor for a particular service. But Dean mentioned it. It's not just checking the boxes that the work was done, but it's really confirmation, validation of the work activities, making sure those vendors are working in your systems. We talk a lot about data. We talk about a lot of this technology. It's amazing how many times we speak with clients and we don't know because that's in our vendor system. So with the increase in outsourcing, this is a very important aspect to make sure you have a good approach and perspective on.
And if I could just add one little point to that, because I've actually done a lot of looking at vendor contracts, support services contracts. What I find most often is that the deliverables are ill-defined. in those contracts. They don't specify where the data is to go. They don't
Right.
actually specify structured data and frequencies and things like that. So if you have a deliverable that says you're going to do this at a certain time, then that should be reflected in your CMMS or EAM system to score that, to basically say, do I have a record now that says this vendor met this deliverable and it's in a form that I trust? I often don't find that exists. So that's something that organizations need to be a little bit more savvy about their procurement activities, because the procurement people don't know your job. They don't know what you're getting for these services. You're the one that needs to make sure you're getting everything that you need out of those contracts.
So as a bit of a summary, what is the playbook? So the playbook is really designed to be that concise guide. It translates a variety of operations from the bottom up into a format that you can use and present at higher levels. Its value is that it is holistic in its theme, financial clarity, risk, performance, and stakeholder. So we're really trying to, in each of these parts of the playbook, identify those various pieces that are critical. The benefits, then facilities, the CFO, sustainability certainly, and the provider. So end to end, understanding what's happening both internally and externally to the organization. Starting, we talked about pick a couple of those high impact pieces, whether it be space and asset or energy and safety, whatever is the most high value in your organization, map the path, create the charter, and come up with that pilot. And certainly there's a variety of support that you could find in your organization for that. And then we have a list of our resources here we use to put some of this together, and we're certainly happy to talk through that. And then with that, I believe we are at our question section.
Yes. Do we have any questions coming in yet? I don't see anything showing up.
I think there was one question I had mentioned, talked about more advanced PM activities. And just to clarify what I meant by that, again, oftentimes we go in with our customer, a lot of our clients, and we ask if you have a PM program in place. And the answer is yes. As we dig deeper into that, we find it's very simplistic in that it's strictly just time-based PMs. So when we look at PMs, we like to break it out into 4 different categories. So when I say more advanced, this is what I'm referring to. Traditional PMs, we call them schedule-based. It's just based off of a calendar, right? You're doing maintenance every 6 months or whatever on your car, as an example. And the challenge with maintenance such as that is oftentimes you're doing maintenance when you should not be doing maintenance. And such maintenance activities can actually have a positive, it positively, it's not really a positive impact, but it increases your reactive work on those types of assets. So you do have, so we'd like to break it down into 4 categories: schedule based, which is based off a calendar, use space, condition based, and predictive based. So those are, as you expand and advance your preventive maintenance program, those are the categories we'd like to see those breaking down into to have a more advanced maintenance program.
I'll even add one, Steve, which is that prescriptive maintenance, where you're getting into the point of using IoT analytics, and those IoT analytics are giving you vibration information, heat information, variety RPM information coming through, which is load based. So you're using sensor based capabilities to say, well, it's a hot day here in Austin, Texas, and we're going to be running things 20% over. That affects everything. Energy goes up. Our PMs are going to have to be cycled quicker because we're burning through a variety of things. The oil is going to burn faster, et cetera. So I think that's another opportunity as there is a digital maturity of the organization to start to get the feedback loop, that final piece of passive technology, informing them of what's happening in the facility.
That's correct.
One thing I'd like to add to that, you're talking about a maintenance maturity model. You're going
Correct.
to higher levels. Many organizations are tempted to leapfrog. I want to go from run to fail to predictive maintenance. That's my next step. But they need to be tackled in sort of a sequence, because condition-based maintenance is you're starting to put some sensors out there, but you're not really integrating it with other data sources at that point. You need to cut your teeth on the condition-based maintenance before you get into predictive maintenance. And then if you go to all the way to reliability-centered maintenance, but I don't know that we have anybody on the call that's running nuclear power plants. That's where you really need RCM. And a lot of manufacturing does that because their revenue is tied to the manufacturing.
Correct.
So, having your manufacturing line go down because you lost a $500 motor and it's costing you millions of dollars an hour in downtime, that should never happen. And that's where reliability-centered maintenance comes into play.
Great.
I think we have some more questions. We're putting one up. I can just
see one
speak
down here that says, how do you determine what assets should be run to fail?
Oh, I could start on that one, and then Steve, feel free to pick in. So that is really based upon that criticality and priority, and also the type of asset that it is. So if you are running a non-critical asset, such as, I'll make the example, which is a simple one, a window air conditioner. Most times you will not do any services on a window air conditioner, right? It's a run to failure. There's other things such as you might have some types of pumps that are essentially non-critical. They could be used for a sprinkler system, etc. You might run those to failure because the overarching cost of tracking them and then repairing them, if they can be repaired in a couple hours, it's not that much of an issue. It's a great question because it brings up all those supporting bits of information, is to understand, is that a critical component? To Dean's point, a very low cost component could be highly critical. So it is a misnomer to equate cost with value to the organization. It needs to be analyzed for its upstream and downstream implications. And I'll leave it there.
There's another angle to that, is that I've heard many people say, well, if it's run to fail, why do we even track it? And I said, whether you track the asset is not a reflection of whether or not it's a run to fail item. Perfect example I had is one of the facilities I was working with. They ran the border stations, basically the border stations for the U.S. government. That station was 3 hours away from the closest maintenance technician.
Right.
So you've got a microwave in there, and it sits inside of a shelf. Now, if that microwave goes out, you're not going to dispatch somebody immediately to go out there, but you want to be able to make sure that when they do go out, they're taking the right piece of equipment in the right size to fit in that space that it goes in, because that's a 3-hour drive. So that's just an example of, you probably want to track the make and model of that microwave, even though it's a run to fail item, just so that you can actually, if you need to replace it, what am I replacing it with? Something that's equivalent size and performance.
Yeah, so it really comes back down to the criticality tracking that you mentioned at the very beginning, Dean. This is why that is so important and so crucial for organizations to have in place, because it gives you a piece of information that you can help in making those other decisions downstream. And unfortunately, many don't track it. And that's why these conversations are then more difficult.
Yeah. And I will make another plug for leveraging components of AI, because you can feed your asset register if you have a closed environment, for example, a closed LLM in your organization that you're able to upload proprietary information into. You can send that some of this information, and it will greatly assist you in ranking and helping you put together the taxonomy or the organization of your assets, the ontology, the connection of assets. pump to air handler to duct, etc. So there's ways to leverage that capability as well. And using your BIM models, which we haven't talked about, but using BIM and GIS can also aid in that if you're able to pull that information out of that BIM tool and analyze it. And the vendors are very good at supporting that kind of work. I think we have one more here Jack is going to bring up, which is relative to the, are there KPI available for standard response times for average types of FM tasks to help set standards? So there's a couple of different things, and Dean and Steve, feel free to jump in. Using the IFMA benchmark documents, which will give you the average costs, the average productivity based upon certain industries, that is a starting point. There's also, from various vendor groups, you can get some information from, depending on which particular trade you're looking for, whether it's in the plumbing or electrical type of trades. A lot of it, I think, is also anecdotal, that we've done work of getting information anecdotally from our clients by pulling information from their systems and deriving that, and then doing an analysis against other benchmarks and peers. So I would say that's depending on your industry, depending on how regulated it is, you may have some of that information available through IFMA or others. Otherwise, it's something you can derive if you have a pretty good subset and history, years of history of work being done. You can start to build your baselines.
As an operations guy, I can weigh in on that a little bit too, is that there really is not a just definitive standard that says this is what your response time should be. It's based on the type of building, on the industry that you're working within, the location of that, the location of the resources. So all of those things are variables that will impact. I mentioned the border station 3 hours away. So it wouldn't do you any good to have a 1 hour response time, because they would never meet that.
Right.
So, what can be reasonably met? So you do have to look at what are the variables involved, and then set them based on one building against another building may have different KPIs for response time just because of some of those factors. And that's where the FM has to make those decisions and not just try to set a random, 1 hour, because that's probably may or may not be reasonable for a given circumstance.
All right, and I think we have one other question coming in, which I think is a great question. How can we integrate RCM performance metrics into our ESG cost benefit analysis? So this is, I think, really a very interesting question in how it's bridging a couple of the different different thoughts that we're having here related to, if you put together your RCM metrics, which are going to be coming from one standpoint, what you're really going to say essentially is, the greater your performance metrics from the assets, you're going to have a lower carbon output, you're going to have lower energy usage, and then you can begin to quantify that using those smart meters. So this particular thought takes a couple of different things together. Are you optimizing the maintenance and having the highest efficiency of your runtime equipment, coupled with, are you actively monitoring the energy demand based upon that? And then are you using that to inform your ESG analysis to say, by doing the proper maintenance techniques, we have reduced our energy consumption and our waste output by a calculatable amount, X%, which is therefore moving our ESG capabilities in a positive direction. So it's a very sophisticated question, and require a good amount of cross-system integration to achieve. It's doable, and I think it would really show the benefit of doing that in ESG.
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on, Howard, and it's hard sometimes for us to quantify, right? Some of what we're talking about is cost avoidance, right? We're doing better maintenance, so we're avoiding maintenance costs. And how do you quantify that is always the challenge.
Exactly. And I just add too that if you're doing reliability centered maintenance, there's probably a good reason for that. And you got to be cautious of not trying to impose too many ESG requirements that override your RCM requirements, because you may be replacing equipment at a more frequent rate in order to maintain that reliability,
Correct.
which is actually going to drive up your environmental impact slightly when you do that, but it's for good business reason. Well, I think that was we're at time, so we're right at time. So, in the spirit of giving people some of their calendar back, I want to thank Howard and Steve for joining us today. And this is a great topic. I love the idea of a playbook. We could spend a lot more time talking about, milestones and things like that you need when you put these in place. But you can also reach out to Aurora engineers and learn more about how they're using this to great effect with their clients. And with that, I will say thank you very much for joining us today, and we'll close out the webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all so much.